Hello, everyone. Welcome to the January 2024 koha-US Cataloging Special Interest Group, where we talk about anything related to cataloging, however tangentially, because cataloging is the heart of Koha. We haven't yet been upgraded to 2305. We're supported by Bywater, but it's coming in a couple weeks. We're very excited. And also the newsletter and features and everything related to 2311 has been released. There wasn't anything I noticed in 2305 that was totally earth-shattering for cataloging that I noticed. Maybe other people did. I'm going to put in the chat some things that are coming in 2311 that I'm really excited about. Bug 29471, showing the 520 note in the staff interface. It's related to that, the 520 summary note. 34075 allows specifying the default tab view for authorities. 27943, Mark 21 authorities not supporting the 7XX on display. Those are added entries and things, and just it's very cool. And then 10762, make it possible to adjust the barcode height and width on labels. And then I have over here in another tab, let me get it, that coming also in 2311 is going to be the creation of a new preservation module. And I encourage everybody to take a look at it because, and I've mentioned this before, it has the ability for public services staff and people to put things into a preservation workflow, and then these items can be assigned different workflows. So I think it's kind of an exciting feature, even if those workflows are not related to book repair or preservation. I think it could be adapted to other uses. So it's a pretty neat new feature. And then coming up, the manual, this is another link that I'm going to put into Bugzilla. The manual is going to be reorganized eventually into sort of one manual. It won't be separate manuals for versions, and that's being worked out. And in the coming days, I've been working on, I've mentioned this before, going to mention it again. I put a page on the wiki related to using the OCLC Connexion client for people, because the OCLC Connexion browser interface is going to be discontinued by OCLC at the end of April 2024. That's the last date I saw. And so people using the Connexion browser interface to OCLC are going to have to switch to a different interface, and maybe they've never used the Connexion client with Koha. It's really easy. I use it. So threw this page up on the wiki with a use case and how we do it, and hopefully that's helpful. So that's about all I wanted to bring to the attention of the group. Does anybody have anything they'd like to bring up?
I have some authority questions.
We love authorities.
Well, I don't really always understand authorities. So what I have is, if you add a new authority record and then you catalog something and you use that term in the record and save it, it gets linked to the authority. But what about all of the past records that you have in the catalog that use that term, but you're not dealing with those right now? Do they get, I thought that at one point in time, they also just got updated and linked, like automatically. but I'm not seeing that happening. So I don't even know if that's a true, if that ever happened or not. So how does that work for older records that use this new authority record that you've created?
It's my understanding that they should be linked when there's a script that runs. It's a magic script, and we're supported by Bywater. So as far as I know, it's done by magic elves. And and that when a new authority record comes into the system, whether it's imported or created from scratch and typed in, that when that script next runs, all the headings matching the 1XX in the authority record are linked, and all of the ones matching a 4XXC from are updated to the 1XX and linked.
And I think that was happening, but now I'm seeing it not happening. And I don't think I've changed anything in the authority system preferences. I think they're set up the same way that they always were. So that's why I wasn't sure, was it even happening? Because I thought maybe I'm dreaming this.
Do you know if you have the cron job running on your system?
Well, that's the other thing. I wasn't sure how it worked exactly. So maybe that's what I need to check on, is whether a cron is running or not. Does that one have a specific name or?
Yeah, it's the merge authorities cron job. There's also a system preference called the authority merge limit. If you don't have the cron job running, you want the authority merge limit to be set. The default is 50 records. And if it has 0 in it, then it's not functioning. So you might want to look at that system preference.
Okay, great. I will do that. Then my next authority question is, say I have an authority record for the topical term cooking fiction, but I would like to have an authority record in there for, say, cooking juvenile fiction. But when I go and look in LC, do a Z39 search and look in the name authorities, there isn't one. So can I just create one? And I have not really created authorities myself, so I'm not sure what goes into that.
Okay, so in the authority files, you're not going to find authority records for all of the free-floating subdivisions like juvenile fiction, which can be assigned to almost anything. You can search the authority files and find usually authority records for subdivisions that, they'll be like, I think it's a 180, that can give you some information. And the documentation, there is documentation from the Library of Congress on assigning them, but things like fiction, juvenile fiction, pretty much you can assign them to anything as long as it makes sense. And it's a very, very typical thing to do to create local authority records with variations that you commonly use for checking. I have found that the setup that Koha comes with for mandatory fields in an authority record are really good. And what I will tend to do when I'm creating a local one is I do new record and I put what I want in the 1XX field. So this 150 cooking, subfield V, juvenile fiction. And then I just hit save and let it tell me which mandatory fields I'm missing, and it'll throw in some default data in a lot of them. And I haven't really updated a lot of this default data. This is my little secret among all of us and the recording audience. I haven't run into any problems in our system from not having looked at the 008s and all of those fields to update them and correct them. This is quick and dirty, very dirty, but my system's working fine.
Okay.
And then what I found I have to key in is the 040 fields. I put in our OCLC symbol in those. I think you can pretty much put in anything you want. And I would leave those as defaults and key something into the subfield A and the subfield C. Subfield A's, I use these very infrequently. Go and double check what I'm saying at the Library of Congress Mark 21 website. But subfield A is creating agency, subfield C is transcribing agency. I think if you just put anything in there, it's fine, but that's really good to put in because it'll let you know which quick and dirty authority records you keyed in versus any you found and brought in from another agency.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that's helpful because I'm training a new cataloger, and so trying to get her used to subject headings. And I don't know if I'll spend an awful lot of time on this, but I just started thinking, well, she gets the link for lots of the headings, and so that gives her, the confidence and knowledge that that's correct. But then there's lots of headings that aren't getting that, so I wasn't sure what I might do there, but that helps. Thank you.
I have a question.
Sure.
In the webinar yesterday, we got all excited about the fact that you can check in something that's lost and the fine stays on the patron's record, but you can withdraw the item. We were really excited about that. Did I get that right, Esther? Where is it written down? We couldn't find. I want to show it to everybody, and I don't know where it is.
Give me a second and I'll post the link to the blog article in the chat for you.
Thank you, Esther. While Esther's looking for that, does anybody have anything else they'd like to talk about?
Our library, our consortium hasn't really had a lot of standards for cataloging. We let authority records just auto-generate, and we import records from all over. So we've got a lot of stuff going on in our system, and we're looking at getting into some sort of standardization. This is what we want to do. And they were asking me about using MARC frameworks for that. And that basically, can you use those at all when you're importing records, or is it only just when you're creating new records to help control what's in there?
I'm going to let someone else speak about it because all of our bibliographic records are in the default framework done, and that's what we use. But I know that there are a lot of libraries that are using frameworks in really good and creative ways.
So I spoke on that at the conference. That it's connected to a system preference that's back to working. Yay! It broke during my presentation. I thought I was safe, but no. How long it had been broken is anybody's guess. At least a month. I was slow on looking at my upgrade. If you chat, so one of the selections is to apply framework when uploading. You can leave that checked or unchecked because some people don't want that on and some people do. What I'm not sure is if it will overwrite what's there. Because in Koha, if I have something in a field and I select the framework, it will not write over what's pre-existing. I have to empty out the bad data. And then, I have to delete all the print book fields and then select online resources for the RDA to show up in my fields. I don't know because I've never used frameworks for uploading. I've always had the information I added the information in Mark Edit before I put them into the record. But my understanding is if it's not there, it'll put it in. I don't know if it will overwrite what's there, or if it will, this is what I wish it would do, because I have books where they need like 2 frameworks because it has a DVD and a print book. And so I need like both. So what I end up doing is do the DVD and then manually, then I'd go into the macros, because macros you can add multiple things, and then I add the print book.
Are you're
Macros lets you
speaking
do
about
both
the
frameworks.
3XX fields?
Yeah. And sometimes the 006 and 7. So sometimes I need those in there as well, depending on what the item type is. So for all of my kit items or multiple item types, because we're in a consortium as well, only the real and trained catalogers have that power of the advanced editor. Because you can seriously mess something up. You could accidentally mess something up very easily because we've made it so easy for the trained cataloger. But it has saved me out, like setting up my macros, setting up my frameworks, saves so much time.
I'm not even sure what you mean by macros.
Okay, so yeah,
so share my screen.
It's time to share screen while you're figuring that out. So for those of you unfamiliar with picking a format, the MARC record, the MARC bibliographic record should have a primary format. So for a book and a DVD, for example, one decides, is the DVD supplemental to the book? Like maybe the DVD, it has a concert video of the author of the novel performing the songs mentioned in the book, then the book is the primary format. But the bibliographic record is going to carry certain fields like 006, 007, and 3XX that relate to the DVD. If the book is subordinate to the DVD, so maybe the DVD is the movie and the book comes with some critical essays and bibliographies all relating to the movie, then the MARC 21 record is going to be in the audiovisual format with those other fields mentioning the book. And Koha is going to have 2 item records, a book item record and a DVD item record. So what Lauren is talking about is after you bring the record in, using the advanced editor, the advanced bibliographic editor, which you can set up macros in to just open up your record in the advanced bibliographic editor, run the macro, those are put in, save. So yeah, Lauren, if you'd like to show us how it's done.
Yes.
And thank you, Fred, for helpfully putting the link to the MARC 21 format at the Library of Congress documentation.
So this is actually a good one because it's missing the codes for the RDA. Because I put them in after this record was created. And so now it populates. That's how you populate it in the record. I do not know when this feature came, but I love that you can now save and continue editing.
Ooh.
I'm on 2205, so y'all are going to be ahead of me pretty soon. If you go into settings and then your advanced editor, and I save, because if advanced editor before saving, I lose whatever I did. So just remember to save before you switch back and forth. I have pre-set up macros for things. So I can tell it to run, and now it's added all of the fields that are in my macro. But I don't want that, so I'm not going to hit save. But then you click save, and then you go back to your basic editor. If I were to save it, it would show up. I would have 2336, 2337, 2338. But that's how macros work. And the system preference that you need to do is apply framework defaults. And here are so one of your options. Oh, you know what? It looks like you can't do it with a fresh, you can put them in a framework, like you can import them in using a framework. But it looks like the system preferences doesn't do a straight import unless when cataloging new records. I use the when changing the framework probably the most out of the 4 options, but I do like all 4 options. But you can pick and choose what you want to do there. If they're not selected, nothing will pre-fill. So I will stop sharing. Hopefully I answered your questions and didn't confuse
that helps.
you.
I think we only have it selected for when cataloging new records. So that's good to know what the options are.
Yeah.
And I put a link in the chat to the Koha Wiki where you can find advanced cataloging editor macros and copy them. Very helpful.
And I don't think I've added some of the ones that I've created that I need to do.
Please do, please do.
I did, so on the koha-US conference page, I was a little slow in getting my resources to Christopher to post. I now have my frameworks, my Koha frameworks, and my mark edit tasks are in a folder and are in a Google Drive, and it's linked on the conference page. So if you have like where you want to just create a new one and upload and see if some of the frameworks that I've already created, because I've already put in the RDA information for the different item types, which was very time consuming. And I hid all the fields that really wasn't necessary. And editing frameworks is time consuming when setting up, but it saves a whole lot of time.
It does. And thank you, George, for putting a link to that in the chat. And everyone, the chat will accompany the recording of this on the koha-US YouTube page too. Thank you, Lauren.
I was just going to mention that with the macros also, you can use those to delete data. So if I bring in a Z39 record from somewhere, usually it'll have a lot of 9XX fields that I don't really want in my record. So I've gone into the macro and told it, you know, delete this 907 or 960, whatever, or, you know, something that doesn't mean anything to me, but that means something to the library that created the record in whatever system they're using. And that's been a big time saver. But it does look like, at least in my testing, that you can only delete like a whole field, I guess. So you can't say go in and delete a 907 subfield B if that's what was in the, you know, if you wanted to keep part of what it was, but not all of it. It looks like it's on the delete, it looks like it's an all or nothing thing. Whereas on when you're creating data to bring in, you can do it by subfield, I think.
Oh, I think you're muted, Fred.
That might help if I unmuted. Thank you. You can use mark edit to delete a certain field in a certain record, so you could do all the. Oh, for one thing, I don't need the fast subject heading, so I can do anything with it's a 2 field, where you can delete all the 907 J's. Sounds like it faster and easier if you could do it in Koha, though.
Yes, let me find some and then I'll share my screen in a moment.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. While Barbara's getting set up, does anyone have anything quick to mention?
You mentioned using OCLC Connexion to import, and we've been using that since we got onto Koha, and it works great. So if I'll look over your instructions, but that's the one thing, you don't have very much control once you export it from Connexion into Koha. It's just automatic and it's just there. And so sometimes it'll match and sometimes it won't, and you just have to go searching to make sure, like it'll tell you that it's imported and overlaid it right in Connexion, which is nice. You get that response back. But then if it doesn't overlay, then you have to go back into Koha and merge it with the record that you already had, if you had one already in. Otherwise, yeah, we like using it a lot, but we don't have quite the lockdown on what our records are, as I said earlier.
Yeah, I haven't looked at it since we set it up. I could look at it if anybody wants me to figure it out, but ours is set up so that there's no bibliographic overlay whatsoever unless I put in that 999 subfield C with the Koha record number as an exact bibliographic match. If that's not in my OCLC record, there's no overlay.
Which might be a better way to control what it's doing when it gets in there. Yeah. Most of the time what we're overlaying is just the baby bib records we get from Baker and Taylor. So we don't mind. Yeah.
Here's a really quick question. Should the 999 C and D always be the same number? Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Okay, I'm going to try and share my screen. Do you see Koha?
Yes, we can. Yes, we're seeing a list of.
So all I did was go in and I was bringing records in, and it's like I kept having to delete a 907, a 908, a 909, and I thought, well, it's easy enough to just highlight it and get rid of it. But I thought, well, can I just get rid of those in the macro? So I looked at what was on the wiki, and you can just say delete and put the tag number in. And so that works great to get rid of extra data all in one fell swoop. But when I tried to do something like, we don't use certain really broad headings, like sometimes fiction will come in and it'll have like a 655 that's just novels, and we're a public library, and that I don't want all of my fiction to have novels in it. It's not worth it for my patrons. So I wanted to go in and say, well, for a 655 second indicator of 7 equals novels, get rid of that, trying to follow that form of the new 690 equals new books that I've got up there at the top, but I couldn't get it to work on the delete side. It seemed to me that it would only delete, you know, a whole tag number and nothing else. And you couldn't say, you know, only do it if it equals such and such.
I think I might have found a link to a macro that deletes a subfield. I
Okay.
think,
That would
but
be really great.
I'm not sure the link that I copied and pasted goes exactly to it, but it's on that page. It's at the bottom of the page, and the macro just says delete space 942N. I'll put that text in the chat.
Yes, I guess I have done that. And I think I did that in the beginning, but then I realized I was deleting all of my 655 tags when I really only wanted to get rid of it when it equaled novels. I think that's what ended up happening.
Yeah, I think that's too fancy, and that's something I think MarcEdit can do.
You might be able to set up a mark modification template to do that as well. And that way you could specify the word novel more specifically.
And if you have questions about that, about mark modification templates, I would encourage you to post to our cataloging group email list, the Google group, open to anyone. Please subscribe. For assistance, email info@koha-US.org. And or the main Koha email list, because Anne Ryan in New Zealand monitors those, and she uses a lot of mark modification templates in a lot of creative ways and runs them as she's importing records. So, and those email questions could attract her attention or other people's who have a modification template set up.
When does the mark modification template get applied? So like if I'm bringing something in, like I have a basic bib record from my vendor, and then I receive my item. So now I'm ready to catalog my item, and then I go to Z39 to bring a record in, and I overlay the record I have in my system. When does that mark modification template come into play?
We don't do this, so I don't want to even try to answer this question. If someone else can.
You can do it through a batch record modification. You can also look up an individual record and look at the normal detail view, and then you go to edit and you can modify the record using a template. And that's where you can apply it individually. So it depends on the number of records you want to change at one time. You can find the batch record modification in the cataloging module.
I'll have to play around with that maybe.
Yeah.
That's how I've learned most of what I've done, is just play around. But do it on a backup copy.
Or there
I
are
said
also
yesterday at the meeting,
I was just going to say, or there are demo systems available that you can have full access to the staff client and throw things into and play on there.
I was saying yesterday at the meeting, I have probably broken more instances of Koha than pretty much anyone else.
Yeah, George puts into the chat, break it, then learn how to fix it is how I get things done. Yeah, I think a lot of us have been there. I see a lot of nodding. If I'm really going to play around with a bibliographic record, sometimes I will export it and save a copy of it and then go crazy. And then I can if I've completely borked it, I have my little saved one I can bring back in. Oh, thank you, Esther. A link to Monday Minutes using Mark modification templates. Thank you.
Did the location of that move to the cataloging tab with the 2305 update? Because I just realized I hadn't remembered where it was, and I just found.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it did.
I'm not crazy.
A lot of things that we catalogers use all the time moved from tools into under the cataloging. Yeah. So does anybody have anything else they'd like to bring to the group?
Yes, but I'm not sure if I can explain it really well, and I'm about to show you some amazing gaps in my knowledge.
We all have those. You're among
Okay,
friends with many knowledge gaps. That's how we learn.
in Medline, Medline uses medical subject headings, and there are heading and then subheading, 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 and let's see. I just pulled up Library of Congress Schedule R. We don't use it, but no one understands me when I talk about W's. For example, RC 734, Specialties of Internal Medicine, subheading Diseases of the Respiratory System, subheading Examination, Diagnoses, Bronchoscopy, Imaging, MRI. Now in Medline, I could just say explode, say specialties of internal medicine, and would look for every subheading under that. Is that possible in Koha?
So I've never worked with medical subject headings.
Yeah, I'm just thinking subheadings in
Yes.
general.
When you're talking about Library of Congress R, you're talking about the classification, Library of Congress classification, the call numbers.
No, I'm using, well, let me see if I have a better one to, let's see, I've got Q, H, and R. It's not really medical related, just sort of classification in general. So you have United States and then say, the regions and then states within the region. If you wanted to do all states, could you just say explode United States, and anything that comes under that in the LC subject headings would be included? Am I making any sense?
Yeah. So you're talking about, say, for example, when you're searching either an authority file like the authorities.loc.gov, or searching in the authorities area of Koha, or searching subject headings in a Koha catalog?
That's, well, I'm searching a certain subject in a Koha catalog.
Okay, so say we're searching, poodles.
Uh-huh.
Or say we're searching dogs. So there's, all poodles are dogs, not all dogs are poodles. So are you saying when you're searching dogs, can you explode it to find which have been established, like poodles, dachshunds, mutts, guide dogs?
Sort of like that, but let's say you want to do a search on dogs, which you want to include poodles. Would it be in the mark record that poodles and then standard poodles, then dogs? Is that a mark
Okay,
problem or is that a koha problem? Or
I get
not?
what you're asking. It is a problem with the way Library of Congress subject headings are applied, a problem or a feature. So the Library of Congress subject headings principles of application are that you catalog to the greatest specificity. So if I have a book about poodles and only about poodles, it's 100% poodles for the poodle enthusiast. It gets the subject heading poodles. Disclaimer, I don't know if there really is such a subject heading, but it gets poodles. In your authority file, the authority record for poodles, 150 poodles, has a 550 broader term, dogs. See also dogs. So it's your authority file and your cross references in Koha and how Koha operates or any other system you're using that is supposed to provide that. See also dogs. You may also be interested in dogs, but your bibliographic record is only going to have poodles because that book is only about poodles. If you have another book that is the history of dogs, illustrated by my experience with my poodle, Mrs. Fluffernutter, then I am going to have a 600 field with the name Mrs. Fluffernutter. I'm going to also have a 650 for poodles because it explains how Mrs. Fluffernutter is the paradigm of poodlehood. But then I'm also giving you the history of dogs through the lens of Mrs. Fluffernutter. So it's going to have a 650 dogs. Other authority systems and heading systems don't operate that way. The Getty AAT, Art and Architecture Thesaurus, is faceted with poodles and dogs and things like that. And it sounds like medical terms are also faceted, and faceted headings operate in different ways. I don't use faceted headings, so I'm not exactly sure how Koha operates with them. And Koha has different settings in the system preferences for how you want your authorities and your cross-references to operate.
Okay, looks like this is a good time to start looking for learning authorities. Okay, too much to learn.
Or is it? George wants to read a book by Mrs. Fluffernutter. Okay, well, when I'm retired, I'll put it on the list.
Do you
I think
or
we need
have
to
you
have
ever
a.
had a poodle named Mrs. Fluffernutter?
And Esther puts in system preferences that may help with broader settings is IncludeSeeFromInSearches. We do use that, and I had a really odd one show up because I had because of corporate names with like Oceanic Shipping Company. It's yeah. Yep, and Kose has joined us. Good to see you, Kose. And
Welcome.
another thing that I will throw out there is that Koha does the bibliographic record does carry headings really well from multiple systems. The second indicator will in the mark format in the 6xx fields, and then sometimes I think it's a subfield 2 relate to which system, which authority system the heading comes from. And Lauren says, I think we need to have a day where we can all work on authorities together so we can suffer and rejoice together. Anytime you want to bring things to the meeting, we can work through them, we can do them together. And Fred says, maybe you should learn indicators. Indicators matter. That's going to be like someday if we can get a t-shirt for a SIG, it's going to be indicators matter.
And somebody needs to do it as a presentation. Yes, I'm talking to you, Heather and Lauren.
It would be fun.
Maybe next year.
Yeah, maybe. All right, Barbara. She successfully created a new authority record for cooking, subfield V, juvenile fiction. Woo!
It was easy. I did what you said and then got the warning error message that I needed to go check the 0xx's, and then those were all highlighted in yellow. And I just clicked through them and saved, and it worked.
Does anyone have a list of places they go to import authorities? Like to set up the Z3950? Like, okay, I know about Library of Congress, but are there more that I should, add to my Z3950 to make my life in the world of authorities easier? So I don't have to create them all. I can just, take someone else's work and make it my own.
We use Library of Congress and OCLC. If it's available, I'd see if New York Public is available. They're a great research library.
I haven't had a whole lot of help or luck with New York Public Library. If you ask nicely, you can get username and password for the British Library. Just have to promise not to make fabulous sums of money by selling their records.
I believe the last time I was at New York Public Library's website, they said that their Z3950 was only available for people in New York.
Fair. If you're interested in any maritime headings, I'm cleaning them up.
Yeah, I guess this isn't a bad time to mention there is, we've talked about the wiki several times. There is a Z3950 page on the wiki. Where is it? Koha Open Z3950 sources that I recently went through and tested all of the sources there. It's meant to be a place where you can share your Z3950 targets, not really a place to share ones that you've gotten from other places. Yeah, that's the link. So if your information isn't on there, you should go in and put yours in if you know it. If you don't know it, I don't know how to find it myself. We're a Bywater customer like many of the people here, and I think we just got it from them. So we just asked and they gave it to us. So
maybe there's a place in the manual. Let me see.
Well, I think you have to go through and set up the Z39 server, the Z3950 server, and that's not part of Koha. It's a separate server, I believe. I think, I'm not 100% sure on that.
I think you can do it in Koha. I have an old video, and I need to make a new one. How to do that? I'm sure everything I have up online is out of date by now.
Yeah, and you can always reach out to a fellow Koha user like me, and for testing it, and I can always be your test user or some other person to see, does it work?
Yeah, I found a link on the wiki to how to set up your Z3950 server.
Great. And Jason mentions a bug 28072. Z3950/SRU servers would be a great addition to Mana KB. Oh, yes. I love Mana. For those unfamiliar with Mana, it's a way within Koha that you can share and import things like reports and serial subscriptions. So yeah, Z3950s, that would be great. Well, we have a couple more minutes. If anybody has anything quick.
I've got a question for Kose. I was working with someone in Eswatini, which, yes, I know far away, but I was trying to look for a Z3950 server for African literature and reports and such. You know of any place?
That might be a question to ask in the consortia group, because there may be some people who have consortia members with strong African literature collections. And or on the email lists too, to reach a wider audience. And if anybody watching the recording has any suggestions, I'll put my email address in the chat. You can always send them to me and I can mention them next month.
Hello. I've been having a little issue, but it's not related to what you're talking about right now.
That's fine.
I work in a special library, and my library deals with national identity management, and the main subject there is biometrics. Biometrics. I'm actually having difficulty classifying it in terms of subject headings, even the class mark. In the LC, I was even having issues looking for it. Using DC, it's giving me issues. So right now I'm using an in-house scheme, but I was thinking, is it possible? Do we have a class like that in LC? Does anyone know? I don't know. I just said, let me think of, just bring it to, if I could have help. Yeah.
That is a great question, and it relates to anybody having trouble finding a Library of Congress call number or some appropriate subject headings or DUI. I would say when you have a record or that question is best answered with something specific. Go ahead and post to our email discussion list or even the main Koha list about that, and then we can take a look at the particular example and get it into the area where that's happening. And I'm always happy to help with that. I know other members with other specializations are happy to help with that. So yeah, go ahead and post either to our cataloging group or the koha-US group or the main Koha email list, and we'll take a look at that and happily bring some suggestions.
Yeah, I happen to
We'll do
have
that.
Schedule R pulled up on my computer and I looked for biometrics and there's nothing in there. This won't help for classification, but for just general records, try the National Library of Medicine, which is, let me put in their address.
It
Try to
might
find it
also be
first.
in Class T for technology in
Oh,
the
yeah.
Library of Congress system.
Yeah, okay, yeah. T for technology. That should have something like that.
Let's see. I don't have I'm not logged in right now, but one thing I'll do at catalog.loc.gov, the Library of Congress catalog, is I'll then select search options and then browse, and I'll put in, I'll try subjects, something like this. I'll put subjects beginning with biotech and see if there are any, or do keyword searches for titles and see if that brings up records at the Library of Congress that might relate, and then I can see how subject headings and call numbers are applied. Because the class web is a paid resource, but there are many examples of freely available Library of Congress documentation. Great. Fred mentioned nlm.nih.gov, National Library of Medicine, and found TK7882.B56.
I happen to have the Library of Congress T schedule on my computer too. They're all available free from the Library of Congress's enormous PDFs. That is the only instance of biometric I could find in the T's, though. It might be in the Q's.
Q for science.
Actually, we've got 1 minute.
Sure.
Searching 700 pages. Didn't find anything. Took me 10 years to get a computer, but I'm glad I have a faster one.
I'll also mention that applying Library of Congress call numbers, I always say, is more of an art, and is very important for how your users are going to look for something. Something like a bibliography on biotechnology, it could go under biotechnology, it could go under bibliographies. So that, I would say, has to do with how your users are going to physically approach the shelves to look for things, or how they're going to be doing their virtual shelf browses to look for things where they want to find them.
The one thing I learned from Heather, which is very important, cataloging isn't really fixed in stone. Just put the books where people will be able to find them.
All right, thank you so much. Presently, like I said, we're using an in-house scheme that I developed myself, but I was just wondering if I could have a more standardized approach to it. That was right. But probably by the next meeting, I will try to make it a bit more specific and see how I can get something out of it. Thank you so much.
Oh, of course. And do feel free to reach out via email in between meetings, and then we can always talk about it, go over it at our next meeting. Absolutely. This is a very common question about classifying, using subject headings. Yeah. And especially since Koha is so good at having multiple, I know people in consortiums carry multiple classification numbers, multiple subject heading, and multiple thesauri in one bibliographic record. Koha can totally work with that. Well, it's a little bit after the hour. I will thank everyone for coming. Looking forward to seeing you next month. And I will go ahead and stop the recording.